I love it when films that you made like a long time ago actually find a brand new audience.
This came out totally out of left field. That this little picture would have the lifespan that it has and the fans around the world. I keep meeting people who go, "You were in Black Christmas?"
I still have tons of people coming up and asking for autographs for Black Christmas stuff. It's amazing to me.
It is a classic in its genre. It's a classic. It has a huge fan base. Once a year or something, every Christmas they show it at these movie theaters, and I was shocked at how many people love this film.
And I am delighted with the response of people that literally have only just seen it or saw it maybe, when they were a kid, and now they say their family sits down with a bowl of popcorn and every Christmas Eve they watch Black Christmas.
Elvis Presley used to watch it every Christmas, and the Presley family to this day still watch it. Priscilla and Lisa Marie watch it every year.
Well, I have many feelings about it. One is I'm extremely flattered and gratified. And the other feeling, and then I go to the other side of it, which is I really wish I had done some other things with it. Had I known that people were going to see it as much as they did, I wouldn't have left that music on. I'd have done something else. But I guess that's the way everybody is. I don't know of a director who doesn't wish he could have done that scene again.
I actually saw it sometime in the 1970s. At first, I thought it was ridiculous. I'll be honest. I wasn't a big horror fan. I didn't realize how modern horror was going to evolve. But after a second viewing, which came in the 1980s, I began to appreciate, especially after meeting Bob Clark for other films, wait a minute, there's something more to this. You suddenly see the layers upon layers upon layers. There's certain elements of Black Christmas that have a sophistication that's unappreciated until, say, a second viewing. And now here we have the chance to see it so many years later, and you begin to appreciate that the late Bob Clark is a late lamented filmmaker of value.
It was, as far as I know, the very first cult slasher movie before, all the Friday the 13th and all that stuff. Obviously, it has some kind of incendiary impact, that it somehow triggered, in a sense, an era. You go to the American film market these years, and 70% of all the movies that are out there are horror movies of one kind or another. It really, in a sense, invented certainly the slasher genre, but also the whole kind of thing that led to the Saws and and all this stuff.
Bob said that it was the first of its kind, that they fashioned a lot of films afterwards. It changed the way that horror films were made. You'd have to talk to Bob about.
I was going to direct a film that John wrote a couple of years after Black Christmas. He was a big fan of Black Christmas. He was just beginning his career. And John had asked me, whether he remembers or not, I think he does, he may not. He asked me if I was ever going to do a sequel, and I said no. His film was the last horror film I was going to do. But if I did do a sequel, he said, what would you do? And I said, well, what I thought I'd do is I would make it the following fall. Somehow in the interim, the killer had been caught. He'd been institutionalized. And I would have him escape. Nobody knows it at first, and he starts stalking them again at the Black Christmas sorority house. And I was going to call it Halloween. Now, when you think of what John Carpenter did, wrote a script really quite different from that idea, just a basic core of it, like a sentence, cast it, directed it, edited it, did the music, what is it? Oh, maybe the title Halloween, he should have given me a little footnote, but I didn't own that either.
I'm sure that you've already heard how it inspired Halloween and all that kind of stuff, but I think more than that, I think it was one of those movies that kind of set the template for virtually everything slasher-wise that came after it.
I wouldn't say it was where slashers really started, but it was kind of one of the first films that really pulled together a lot of things that were happening in horror film at the time and kind of really set the mold for where slasher films were kind of going to go in the next 20 years.
Prior to Black Christmas, to me, I can only think of a few Italian films, primarily Mario Bava's Twitch of the Death Nerve, or Bay of Blood, however you know it as. It is a body count movie with a lot of dead bodies in it. It's a slasher movie. And it's, it definitely predates Halloween by several years, but of course Black Christmas predates Halloween by a few years as well.
If you look at anything with a holiday theme in it at all, whether it's Mother's Day or any of those movies, I think there's probably a tangential connection to it. I mean, a movie like this has such long tendrils and has touched so many other things that by now I'm not even sure that you can trace all the influences back. But I do think that without Black Christmas, the slasher genre would have been a much different thing.
A very interesting and little known fact about Black Christmas was that its original title was called Stop Me. That made me stop and think. Would we have had all these holiday-related horror movies, such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, My Bloody Valentine? Would it have been called My Bloody Valentine, or would it have been its original title, The Secret?
Bob Clark came along and he really defined some of the best tropes of the slasher genre. A killer in the house, terrorizing women. You've got a group of people who are being picked off one by one. The point of view of the killer shots, which of course was incorporated by John Carpenter in Halloween and is one of the most famous things about that film as well.
Bob Clark was doing stuff that no other horror film directors were doing at the time. Maybe even other film directors were doing it at the time. So yeah, it's a film that just continues to hold up. It's not a haunted house film, but it features a house, it features a killer. You know, it's got that twist ending that always works. Every time you see it, you know, if you've seen the film, you know that it's coming, but it's still chilling. It just always holds up.
It was quite a surprise to me when I realized after having watched it that my film, Bloody Valentine, was actually kind of inspired or influenced a little bit. I ended up doing a couple of things that you could now call an homage to Black Christmas if I actually thought of it at the time. No, it just seemed to be natural for some reason or another. My entrance of the miner into Mabel's laundromat reminds me a great deal now of Billy's entrance into the house. It's the same kind of camera movement, the same kind of creepy, slow camera movement, POV, with just the hands of the miner opening the door and moving along and looking in and hiding and moving behind walls, the kind of things that Bob was doing. He's got that fabulous little bit where Billy starts going into almost like a childish, crazy, wild lullaby.
Little baby bouncing, daddy's gonna hunting.
I ended up doing that without again thinking about it as Axel, the miner, disappears down the end of the shaft, and he ends up doing that kind of creepy, weird little lullaby-ish, gibberishy song as he's leaving. Did I think of that at the time? Absolutely not. It just felt right. And I think a lot of filmmakers, whether consciously or subconsciously, were and are using some of these established things that Bob experimented with.
I like to think that it's had a great influence on the horror genre, but I think it might be too much to suggest that every time somebody used a handheld camera or had a scraping piano, that it's all because of Black Christmas. I think maybe Black Christmas stimulated it, and maybe that's the reason, but is it the only reason? I suspect not.
Sometimes you know you have an interesting idea, but sometimes you don't realize how interesting it is until much later in life.
I think Black Christmas and its appeal over 40 years is just simply that. It's scary. There's nothing more to it than that. It's effective. It works. I think that because it established so many of the tropes that people are used to seeing, you know, in these kind of movies, POV, faceless killer, all that stuff, that it's not that far outside of what people have seen.
And if you're a horror fan, he's doing all kinds of cool things for the first time. He's using cinema to encourage us to use our imagination. So the film hardly has any blood in it. There's no penetration shots of anyone getting stabbed, but you feel like you've seen these things. It's a lot like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where people that have seen that movie believed it was this gore fest, and it's really not.
Rather than it being the horror films that we're sort of used to now, it really is a psychological thriller. And that, I think, is much more terrifying. It's much more terrifying what you don't see than what you see. The mind has an amazing thing, incredibly what your imagination can do. And it can expand fear to such a degree. Whereas when you're actually confronted, if you're actually confronted with someone wielding a knife at you, you have a good sort of sense of self-protection, fight or flight or whatever. But if you don't know, so that's the difference. Here's a man coming at you with a knife. Okay, I can either knock it out, I can knee him in the groin, I can defend myself. But if there is something that mysteriously is there, but I can't see it, I feel it, but I can't see what my danger is, I find that much more frightening. And I think that's what Black Christmas has always had going for it, for the very beginning.
The horror of what the audience will imagine is much greater than anything we could show them.
I think we've been glutted with really gory horror films that just, scare the bejesus out of you and give you nightmares. That's not really what we want. We want to have our mind involved in a way that, we go, okay, this is extremely real, extremely possible.
We have movies now with special effects that blow Black Christmas right off the map. We have no shortage of blood and gore, if we want to see that on screen. Yet, people who have no idea about the making of Black Christmas still find it very chilling.
Movies like Black Christmas, not necessarily plot-driven, and if they were dubbed into any kind of language that would be foreign to whoever was watching them, you'd still get the effect of horror from the movie because of the mood, the tone, the texture, the cinematography, and that deft use of sound.
People have a certain way that they feel like they want to feel at Christmas, and this movie subverts that.
It's this feeling of Christmas gone wrong, this uncanny feeling of this most treasured holiday. Peace and goodwill towards man has now been perverted into this dark, somber nightmare.
What Bob Clark did in Black Christmas was create that kind of feeling like everybody's going to die and it's going to be horrible, but it's the anticipation that was built up that was unique in that time. It's a matter of creating the tension and the idea that the unknown force could take you down. And that's, of course, that is a trope of all horror movies going right back to the silent era.
Maybe horror films have always had a central figure, whether it was Dracula or The Mummy or something like that, some kind of mysterious and malevolent kind of entity, This film has it, but on a very naturalistic basis. This is not anything supernatural, but some kind of expression of humanity that is tormented and capable of horrific things.
There must be something in this genre that echoes some internal, maybe a sense of maybe people feeling out of the society, It's a metaphoric reflection of an internal disconnect and lack, which in a sense it then, as art should do, presents it to the viewer and thereby provides a certain kind of release. These films like Hitchcock, Psycho predicted, in a sense, the insane, truly insane, serial killings that have been taking place now and are unfortunately part of our society now for well over 30 years, the Columbines and and you see these kids and they're just like the boy next door. Gee, he was such a nice kid, right? He's in the house, right? It's me, Billy. And even that line, it's me, Billy, right? Recognize me, see me, love me. know me. Nobody knows me. You know, all these beautiful girls in this house, and nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to go to a movie with me. Let's go see Black Christmas together. You know, that kind of thing.
I make you pretty. I'm like a tuning fork, baby. I'm going to kill you.
More so than, you know, the faceless killer and all the kind of stuff, is the tone. It's the tone, this kind of vulgar tone that is the thing I think that really makes this movie work so well and so beautifully.
Oh, fuck.
It's raunchy, it is self-aware enough to know that it's raunchy, but its intent is completely malevolent. It is there to shock and disgust and scare you around every corner, so that when you have, you know, Margot Kidder's character saying something like, this is a sorority, it's not a convent. You know, in 1974, that line probably packed some punch when she gave drinks to little kids, all that stuff. There's just a really kind of vulgar tone to it that I think is part of the thing that makes it memorable, and I think those elements have filtered down into a lot of the slasher movies that came afterwards.
There's a certain species of turtle that can screw for 3 days without stopping. No, really, they just 3 days, 24 hours a day.
The moments of humor are just excellent. Like, they're really funny. Like, the movie's really tense, so those little spots of humor just kind of ease it just a little bit, but enough to make it seem like you're in a real world.
Could you give me the number at the sorority house? Please.
Yeah, sure. It's, Fellatio 20880.
What?
Fellatio. It's a new exchange, FE.
What's this? Well, that's the number at the sorority house. Fellatio? Yeah, it's a new exchange, FE. New exchange? Yeah, Felicia. One of the girls that was in this afternoon gave it to me. She gave it to you? Yeah.
Bob Clark's characters are so well drawn, interesting, and memorable even today. Even 40 years later, you remember these characters. You remember Barb talking about the turtles. You remember Mrs. Mack hiding bottles of hooch around the house.
It's excellent writing, excellent filmmaking. It's an excellent story. It's got a great location. The house is a character unto itself. The people are like people you can identify with. I can't identify with anyone in the movies these days. I really can't. You watch anything from the 70s and 80s, people just came off as more real.
Bob either caused his characters to be honest or allowed them to be. They were true to themselves.
The concept of honest young adults living their lives, they have a dimension to them, a human dimension to them, a human honesty to them. Again, something that I tried to do with my film. This wasn't about 16-year-olds, shallow 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds worrying about how their makeup is or what they're going to wear to the prom. These were real life situations, real life questions.
Each of the kills in this movie matter. Each of the kills count, and that's something, and each of them are scary, and that's something that makes this movie worth going back to time after time after time.
It's still impactful today because it tells exactly the same story in the modern context as it did in 1974.
A good example of why the film feels so modern is the character of Jess and her pregnancy, and she's planning an abortion, and her boyfriend's upset about this.
You're talking about killing a baby as though you were having a wart removed.
And she actually tells her boyfriend that she's not going to marry him because she's pregnant. This was shocking material at the time, and it's really progressive.
I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things. You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed. Be realistic. I can't marry you.
Here's a character that in most horror films would be dead within the first scene. I mean, she would have been the first to go. She's having sex out of wedlock. Clark was kind of always interested in equality issues and racism and gender politics. So it's not a big surprise to me that he has this character that's a very that normally would be dead, and it's the hero of the film. She's a strong, independent character, and I think that still speaks 40 years later to what audiences want to see.
The questions of morality are still with us. The matter-of-factness of the abortion, the fact that women were assuming, and very matter-of-factly and honestly, their sexuality. There was no shame involved in their attitudes.
Can you believe that? 3 days? I'm lucky if I get 3 minutes.
All of the sorority sisters have really interesting personalities. They have depth. They feel like real people.
For all its vulgarity and for all its, sort of misogyny, in some ways, it's also a really pro-female movie.
Female characters were not just disposable. And this was 1974, and that wasn't true of mainstream American cinema. So here's this American expatriate working in Canada who seemed to have more sensitivity towards female characters.
Bob Clark was great in that he handled the material with the women really well in a way that a lot of slasher films become exploitative. Now specifically I'm talking about the camera sort of luridly focusing on women while they shower or they're getting changed. None of that is in Black Christmas. He's focusing on the tension and the scares and creating actual characters. So we don't have that, kind of nasty voyeuristic element to it that really came to define the subgenre later on.
At the time that Bob Clark first came to Canada and made a film like Black Christmas and later made, Porky's, there was a kind of cinema that was scattered. The mainstream cinema almost didn't exist. And Black Christmas was one of those things that helped build the entire structure.
Bob Clark was the first guy to get out there and really show people how a Canadian horror film could be made and could compete on an international level.
Black Christmas has never really gone away. Black Christmas has always kind of popped up on television. There's been a DVD release here or maybe a video release there. It's never completely disappeared. I don't think it's probably ever really been out of print.
And I've done a whole bunch of Canadian films, but certainly not anything that's had that kind of impact.
In terms of Canadian cinema, Black Christmas is one of the all-time great films, horror film or not. Beyond that, the film is also unabashedly Canadian. It's Canadian in a way at the time where it didn't even want to be Canadian, but it couldn't help it. And what I'm thinking of is the one scene in the police station where there's a little American flag on the desk, and people laugh out loud when they see that if they're Canadians, because they look at the film and it's ridiculously Canadian. They don't buy into the American flag business for a second. I mean, you've got people out in the snow, you got hockey practice, you got some very Canadian accents. The film is overwhelmingly Canadian. Yet for some reason, due to the American market, they felt the need to sort of put these little tokens in, which is hilarious. But it's also a very Canadian thing during that era when they were, making a lot of tax shelter films. They were really trying to appeal to the American market. And you can feel the cold in that movie, man. Like, it just feels like a cold winter night. They're out there, they're making films in Canada, they're suffering for their art, and you appreciate it a little bit more because of that.
What makes it a great Canadian movie is that it does capture that feeling of those cold winters, of being alone at Christmas time, being alone at Christmas time. I mean, that's a depressing thing. And there, again, that sense of melancholy, I think, is very unique to the Northern experience.
We have a history in our cinema of ineffectual male characters, especially authority figures, and that comes through huge in this movie. You've got the police that are completely ineffective. You have Doug McGrath playing a cop that's a complete buffoon. An angry boyfriend who can't control his emotions. You've got boyfriends that can't do anything to stop the killings or keep their girlfriends safe. At the end of the day, it's the women that kind of have to take care of these things themselves. And that's a very common trait in Canadian cinema. We just have a really hard time depicting masculinity on screen. If you listen to the commentary that Bob Clark did for the movie, he is really conscious of what he's doing with the camera. He's talking about creating depth and textures, and there's a lot of camera movement that gives the film all this energy and often extra tension as well, because he's moving around the house in ways that doesn't really happen in a lot of other films. A lot of difficult shots in the movie.
Just about every film that I've seen over the years, right down to modern films, end up using some way or another the kind of movements, camera movements or atmospheric movements, the use of foreground in revealing things. He kept that camera moving so much, and considering the fact that he was actually shooting in a real house, this was not a studio, and the kind of camera movements that he was doing, close to 360s, I know very well they were shooting on Panavision equipment, and that stuff is yay big. And even the smaller cameras or the smaller magazines at the time weighed a ton. And somehow or other, he was able to find ways of moving that camera. Burt Duncan, those guys did such a great job on that. Those movements are reminiscent of just about every film at one point, especially now I'm noticing in later horror films or later movies, the lateral reveal. And what Bob did a great deal was the sideways lateral reveal as opposed to the moving in and the moving out. It just added a certain creepiness to it. It added a certain perspective and made the house look bigger.
What I call, in Black Christmas, I call the Billy Cam. The POV, that is very frightening to sort of see, and it was wonderful, that cameraman, but being able to see that the stalker is in your midst, but the camera becomes that eye.
We're normally, or had been, I guess, normally used to seeing the bad guy doing something. The bad guy's going to break into a house. The bad guy's stabbing someone. But to see it through the eyes of the person means that we don't see the person. That's terrifying. That's the scary part of this and we're seeing it through the eyes of the person that's about to come in and bugger all that stuff up. And that works beautifully. I mean, John Carpenter has used it. From now on, it's hard to find a movie that doesn't have some kind of POV shot in it, particularly in the horror genre, because it is so effective, because it is creepy, because it doesn't give away the identity of the villain, because it is a great way to create atmosphere and to create tension.
I'd spoken to Bob about an idea I had for mounting the camera on my shoulder, and I had a special harness made up that allowed me to have lots of flexibility with it. It was actually made out of about 1-inch wide steel that was very thin that came down the front and had a pad that rested on my stomach, and it was hinged at the shoulders so it would allow me to lift the camera, which was mounted right about here. The lens was about there on my shoulders, so that when I climbed the trellis and everything, I got both hands in. And also, when I looked up at the top of the trellis, I was able to raise the front of the rig so that the camera lens itself would tilt up and be able to look up.
Sound is a tremendous part of Black Christmas. Music is almost no real music, it's all sounds, musical.
Of course it had screams and stabs and its share of high intensity sound, but it reminded me of when I, in certain scenes, tried to, kill the actor along with Billy killing the actor, and I'd have stabs and shrieks and screams and musical explosions, and everything that we could possibly think of. And I remember Bob resisted that from the very beginning with, saying, well, it's not necessary. Let it breathe. He was absolutely correct. And I think that's what makes the film stand up. It doesn't overpower, it doesn't overwhelm, it doesn't insult the audience with, you must see this the way I intend for you to see it. It takes the chance.
There's such a silence in the movie. There's long landscapes where, long sequences where you don't really hear any of Carl Zitzer's very sparse piano music, which is beautiful as well. And it's just quiet, punctuated by Christmas carols here and there.
I knew I was going to have to do something different. Now, what does different mean? So I started listening to avant-garde composers, to John Cage, to Morton Subotnick, who's one of the early electronic people. So I tried every kind of sound I could think of. I had an old upright piano that I twisted and turned and detuned, and I think, let's say if I tried 100 things, maybe 6 of them worked. And then in the mix, a lot of this music was created in the mix. I brought in textures of things, wind, toned wind. I think we often have to train the audience prior to that scene to realize that when I hear that, something really bad is going to happen. It has to somehow connect with something that the audience feels organically.
It's all right. Shh, pretty Agnes.
Billy's voice was substantially done by Nick Mancuso, whom I remember got himself into such a state while he was doing it. He was moving back and forth and, like becoming that creature. And he became so much of that creature and got so deep into it that he fell into the Foley pool.
The baby! What happened to the baby?
I wanted to compress the thorax, so I did it standing on my head. That's how the sound came out. So I would just go into some kind of trance state and start making sounds and noises, and then and then those were then merged, right, with the electronic aspect of it and the other voice, and I can't remember her name.
Could that be one person?
Bob did a lot of it. I can tell which one is Bob. I did some. Bob did the singing part. There's some parts where there's a little bit of a tune to it. Bob did that. We had a machine called a harmonizer. It seemed very, very advanced at the time, which I suppose it was. Now you couldn't get, $5 for it. But it could detune things. Its purpose was to put things back in tune. But of course we had no interest in back in tune.
Bob Clark had someone on set while they were filming the scenes on the phone, filling in for Billy. But what they were saying was not nearly as nasty as what ended up on the audio track. And I believe it was Lynn Griffin talked about how when she finally saw the film, it was quite shocking. And it is shocking, even from today's perspective, to hear the kind of things that are being said. I mean, it's some really nasty stuff.
Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge.
I'll stick my tongue up your pretty pussy.
You fucking creep!
I love this poster so much. The new poster is great, and I'm still on there. That's great. Gary Pullen, thank you. Thank you. That's great.
Why I did the poster? Well, I don't want to say because Anchor Bay came to me. It's not really why. I mean, they wanted me to do the poster for the 40th anniversary screening. They asked me to do it, and I was just super excited to do it. And I've always, every time I watch a movie, I have ideas for posters now. You just can't get around like watching a movie without thinking, oh, how would I, if I really like the movie, I'm thinking, how am I going to turn this into a poster? And I've got years of research on Black Christmas. I mean, every time I watch it, it's just, there's so many cool visuals in it, and it's just a film that really speaks to me as an artist. I really wanted to capture sort of the dread that's in the movie. As we know, it's not a very visceral movie in terms of violence and on-screen blood. So what I wanted to do was capture sort of the atmosphere of the film. And my first tackle of the poster was just the house with the sort of the sky making up the Christmas tree. Which is kind of a cool image on its own, but then I sort of we want to see Billy even, on the poster. It's always nice to see that eyeball. That eyeball, is just a really iconic moment in the movie, but it's also a very terrifying scene. There's as much terror in Billy's eyes as there is his victim's eyes, and that's what makes him a scary killer. He just seems batshit crazy, and he seems like he's made up of several people. And that's what really makes him frightening. And that eye really says there's more going on inside this guy than just, a killer.
Agnes, don't you tell what we did, Agnes.
It's good to remember that genre filmmakers like Bob Clark are not just throwing stuff up on the screen in order to make money, to shock audiences. They actually were true filmmakers. I think he's extremely underappreciated in what he had to offer.
I think Bob Clark is a genius of a director. I wish he did more films like that.
Bob Clark once said, "The film dictates my style." And what he meant by that is he didn't buy into the auteur theory where he needed to put his stamp on everything he was making. Instead, he liked the idea of having his style best serve the narrative and the genre that he was working on. And I think that's a sign of a very good filmmaker, but one that people don't talk about because it's not a specific signature as much.
Bob Clark made two of the most famous Christmas movies of all time because he made A Christmas Story, completely the opposite kind of film, but enduring in the same way. He was absolutely lovely to work with.
Losing Bob Clark because of a drunk driver on the Pacific Coast Highway who did a head-on collision with Mr. Clark's car when he was driving with one of his sons is one of the tragedies of cinema, and we don't realize it enough. We have lost a really fascinating, complex, spirited, passionate filmmaker who loved Canada, loved Canadian cinema, and was instrumental in kickstarting our industry at a crucial time.
I love this movie, and I love it not intellectually at all. I love it emotionally.
My first contact with Black Christmas was actually when I worked at a video store years ago in Edmonton.
I was raised in an environment where, my mother loved this stuff, my dad, people loved horror and dark fantasy, and I was encouraged to explore that within reason.
When I first started dating my wife, now, our first Christmas together, we watched Black Christmas on DVD, and it was, I think, probably one of those moments where she's like, I'm not sure if this relationship needs to continue past this point. She was much more disturbed by it than I thought she would be, which means that the movie, 40 years, or more after it was made, still works very well.
Black Christmas was this film that kind of floated around and people mentioned it once in a while as being something that was really cool. And I discovered this amazing horror film that nobody seemed to be talking about. So I started researching it in the library so I could write papers on it. Looked at old reviews, and eventually I found one guy that was writing about it online, Paul Korup from Canucksploitation.com.
It was one of the first Canadian horror films that I really knew about.
And because of that one film, we became pen pals. And eventually I moved out to Toronto, and we've been really good buddies ever since. I love it because it represents a very special experience and a great friendship for me.
It was my grandmother when I was a little boy who loved this kind of stuff. And I remember her telling me specifically about a movie called Black Christmas that she had seen on TV late at night, and how terrified she was, and she had never seen a movie in her life as frightening as Black Christmas. And it was probably about 20 years until I actually saw the film. She was right. So my love of the film isn't just a love of the movie as an experience, as a horror movie, but it's a love of that period in my life when I was really looking for something, and my granny was warning me about this. There was this taboo movie that I wasn't allowed to see that terrified my granny, and if it scared my granny, God help me, what would it do to me?
It was a joyful experience. We felt we were doing something worthwhile, and maybe we'd have a hit, some slightly classic overtones, and we thought we had a chance.
It's sort of fascinating the way it turns out that something that you didn't put the same weight to as you might have other things turns out to have this kind of extraordinary longevity. I didn't think it would ever see the light of day. It was a movie I didn't think anybody'd see. I just didn't, I put the right amount of effort into it, but I didn't take it very seriously in terms of what the product was going to be and what it was going to end up as. So it was just a delightful surprise.
I'm actually quite delighted to be sitting here 40 years on. I was actually sitting here doing one of these 25 years on. All of a sudden, these fans of the film started to appear and wanting to make contact, and I went, this is interesting.
Thank you very much. That would be my message. Thank you for your appreciation of the film.
If I was actually there, if I was one of the characters that night, I think I would have survived.
I think if you ask that question of anybody, oh, everybody would survive because we're all smarter than the other guy.
I don't know. I wouldn't go into the attic to check anything out, that's for sure.
If that really happened to me, I'd be out of that house so fast you wouldn't be able to say Olivia. I mean, I'd be gone.
Probably yes, because I'm chicken shit.
Oh, I would have probably been one of the first to go.
Oh, no, 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 no. I would have been one of the first to go.
I am the kind of person that if you said, it's dangerous in this house, get out of the house, I would get out of the house.
Well, I'm a Sicilian. We survive anything.